Horeb. We're in the middle of the winter. It's starting to snow. People are skidding around. And we're going to find the direct route. Right? Today we're going to find direct route. We've devoted a lot of time to learning about the sacred qualities of Shabbos and the importance of Shabbos. And they're leading up to the observance of Shabbos. We have a good sense of why it's important to observe Shabbos, what the benefits are to the neshama of Shabbos, right? But so far we haven't really found out what it means to observe Shabbos. And in this, we're about to begin with paragraph 144, page 64, with really the bottom line of Shabbos, the malachas, that which we should not do. And I'm going to ask a little bit of patience with everybody in this, because it's not the easiest of pieces, because Rav Hirsch has such a remarkable mind. He doesn't make it that simple. And rather than answer a lot of questions right now in my own words, I would rather we were patient a little bit. We'll move forward through it, and Rav Hirsch will answer some of the questions that I know will be on your minds in the first two paragraphs. Okay, so just be patient, and we'll, as we get into it, it will be self-explanatory. But at first it's going to be, the overview is a little tough, I would say. Okay, so we ended yesterday, or last week, with understanding how important Shabbos was. And in summary, Rav Hirsch told us that it makes us a partner in creation with God, that it is a time of Kedusha, a special moed, a special time put aside for a higher level of Kedusha, that it's a bris, that it's a covenant in itself with Hashem, and that it's a bracha. That's a summary of all the important things about it, right? It's called an ois, a sign, right? We said two other signs are the bris milah and tefillin, and Shabbos is among those. And we mentioned that Shabbos is a litmus test for whether a Jew can be trusted as a witness, for instance. If he's Shomer Shabbos, that's the first question that has to be asked before he testifies. So the definition of a malacha, that's where we are now. Right. Malacha, there are 39 malachas, and we're going to find out all about them eventually. Malacha, which is forbidden on Shabbos, is conceived as the execution of an intelligent purpose by the practical skill of man. Now, read that again. Right. And by the way, at the beginning of this, Rav Hirsch is really going to dwell on what are Torah prohibitions. Later on we'll come to rabbinic ones and why, etc. But the foundation of the issues are malachot. And so there are these things which are forbidden by the Torah. The malacha, which is forbidden on Shabbos, is conceived as the execution of an intelligent purpose by the practical skill of man. Or more generally, production, creation, transforming an object for human purposes, but not physical exertion. Physical exertion is not how we judge a malacha. Even if you tired yourself out all day, as long as you have produced nothing within the meaning of the term malacha, as long as your activity has not been constructive exercise of your intelligence, you have performed no malacha. I know what's on your mind. Hold the question. On the other hand, if you have engendered without the slightest exertion, even the smallest change in an object for human purposes, then you have profaned the Shabbos. Thank you very much. And here's a man who blesses the Shabbos.
You never see that, I bet. In a long time. Hello.
I look forward to it.
The reason why we do mitzvahs and why do we sweat the small stuff?
Sounds great. On the other hand, if you engendered without the slightest exertion, not breaking a sweat, even the smallest change in an object for human purposes, then you have profaned the Shabbos, flouted God, and undermined your calling as a Jew. Your physical power belongs to your animal nature. It is with your technical skill which serves your spirit that you master the world. And it is with this that a human being should subject yourself to God on Shabbos. Take that which is particular to yourself and subject it to God on Shabbos. And in so doing, the other four things that we talked about become yours. Your covenant, your kodesh, your bracha, your time of blessing, or all the benefits. The laws concerning the prohibition of work on Shabbos, which are nothing but the practical realization of the above-mentioned concept of malacha, are of course as comprehensive as the entire activity of man, because everything has to be separated between prohibited and permitted on Shabbos, right? So we know how to behave, right? So things you might not really think very much about, but could happen, have to be considered. Right? So they're very extensive. That's his point. For our purposes, it must suffice to throw light upon the basic principles of the laws concerning the prohibition of work on Shabbos, with the aid of the Shabbos concepts developed here. Among the illustrations given, such examples will be selected as occur most frequently in actual life. So it's good to see that he's not being theoretical. For more details, the reader's attention is directed to the instructions given in the Shulchan Aruch. One of the cautions, and I actually just was in a class about it, and it's something that very often gets rabbis into trouble. And that is, we talked about this previously, hypotheticals. Right? Because hypotheticals can work in situations where where it will be repeated in the same manner. But because halachas deal with the foibles and the strengths of human beings, and each one is individual, hypotheticals very rarely are of value. And I'll give you an example, a horrendous example. One of the great Gedolim of our time, he should live and be well, is Rav Avadia Yosef. He's not the chief Sephardi rabbi, but he is really the leading voice and the posek of the generation among the Sephardim. About 20 years ago, he wrote a paper on a very interesting subject. I was learning this in a class with Rabbi Kroken over the last 2 weeks. The subject was this. We know that one of the highest ideals of Yiddishkeit, one of the most important rules in Yiddishkeit, is preserving life. Right? Because we know that Shabbos is among the highest, and we violate Shabbos to save a life. So saving a life is very, very important for Jews. How important is the land of Israel?
Very important.
Very important. But the question is this, and this is what Rav Avadia is addressing. If you knew that you could save lives, Jewish and non-Jewish, but specifically Jewish in this case, by giving up part of the land of Israel, theoretically, just theoretically, right? Does pikuach nefesh outweigh the settling of the land of Israel? Right? Very good question. Would you say? It's a good question.
Yeah, it's a very good question.
It's a good question, right? So he writes an extensive premise to his opinion, saying that none of this applies today. It's entirely academic. That in order for this to happen, you would have to have a guaranteed partner.
That's the problem.
That's reliable in peace, right? And then you could consider these possibilities because you would have a guarantee that there would be peace. Right? And he makes very clearly no such partner exists, and so what I'm now writing is something within the theory of halacha. Only for that. Not intended to be taken as halacha. Right? So he writes it, right? And you can imagine the results. The results are the left in Israel says, Rebbe Avadia, one of the great, holy, right-wing rabbis, says we should give up land for peace.
Mm-hmm.
They go to Oslo. In Oslo, people are quoting to them, your Rabbi Avadia Yosef says we should give up land for peace. Right? We're talking about not some wishy-washy person. This is somebody grounded in halacha. You know, you have a question. If you're a Sephardi Jew and you have the most complex question of halacha today, you go to Rabbi Avadia. That's the reliable place, unquestioned. Rabbi Yisraeli, who is at this point the Rosh Hashiva of Rav Kook's yeshiva and close friend of Rav Avadia,
Rav Kook,
right, writes a rebuttal.
Right? He would.
And in writing the rebuttal, he says, make no mistake, this is halacha, what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You don't give up land. You don't give up land, right? And it's most unfortunate that my dear friend Rabbi Avadia wrote such a thing, because it can very easily be taken out of context, which within a very short time it was. Now, interestingly enough, at the same class, Rabbi Grossman, Avi Grossman, raised his hand and he said, you know that a few years prior to this, Rabbi Avadia said his position was, don't give up land. Right? So he was saying, this is an academic experience. So the reason I'm saying all this is that when you come to a question in your own life of halacha, right, then that's a serious question that deserves an answer. When you ask a question for the sake of asking it, right, you have to understand that the answer may not be useful to you at the time you need it, because circumstances will be different. You know, you'll be a day older. The world will have changed. Your relationships with your children and wife may have changed. You know, I don't mean radically change, slightly, which may change the nature of the response. So it's very important when you're dealing with these things. Now, he's laying down rules and defining things, right? But in terms of how they apply to us on a day-to-day basis, it's very important to understand them. And if you have a question, even a small question, you know, to ask a Rav, you know, to give an opinion on it. By the way, there's no requirement that you accept the Rav's opinion. You're not dealing with a Rabbi. It's not a Hasidic environment. You can question him. You can come back to him. You can say, well, why is this? What's your reasoning? Right? You should not feel that, you know, I've gone to Sinai and this is the word of God. This is the word of a person who knows you and knows the law. But you may have additional evidence that you didn't think of, that you want to bring out in the conversation. So it should be a dialogue with your Rav. Right? But that is the way you should approach these things at the time you need it, not hypothetically. Okay, so we'll go on. So he's going to give us examples. That's why I raised this, right? That will be selected most frequently in actual life. For more details, the reader's attention is directed to the instructions. And you'll see, whenever you read anything in any book, they will always tell you, this is guidelines only. If you have an issue, ask your Rav. You'll see in every halacha work it'll say that. And there's a good reason for it. With the Sabbath idea explained as above, the two principles which underline the regulations concerning the prohibition of work on the Sabbath become evident at once. The principles are Malacha Makshava, Isser to Torah. The Torah forbids a malacha, the execution of an intelligent purpose by practical skill, and two, Kol Hamalkakim Kin Piturim. Right? Any act of pure destruction, however strenuous, is not a malacha. I'll give you an example. You'll see sometimes people, when they open a can on Shabbos, right, open the bottom of the can instead of the top. Right? The reason is that if you open the top of the can, right, you've actually created a vessel. You know, you pour the liquid out of it, and then you can reuse it as a vessel. So there's a question whether you're creating a vessel at that point, and it's an issue. Yeah? If you puncture the bottom of it, let the liquid out of it, then open the top of it, right? You haven't created anything, you've just destroyed something.
Yeah.
This is permitted, right? You can destroy a kli on Shabbos, but you can't create from a point of view of derisive. So generally speaking, these are two principles. We don't create, you can destroy. It's not a Torah violation, although it can be rabbinic in some cases. Okay, next. The activity which is described in the Torah as one which destroys the essence of Shabbos, that is, the practical carrying out of an idea that shows the would-be dominion of a human mind over the world of matter. This comprises consciousness. If a work is done misasek, unconsciously, by mistake, really, so that it is not a genuine reflection of a human personality, the Torah does not regard it as a malacha. You're out of habit because your mother tells you to turn the light off.
In the bathroom.
At the beginning of observing Shabbos, you'd switch the light off, right? And as I noted, you always switch the light back on very quickly. Hopefully God didn't notice. Now you've violated it twice, off and on, right? It's a reflex thing. I've
actually done that.
Everybody has. It's just a reflex thing, and it's not something that was done consciously. It's a completely unconscious activity. All right. Kavana. Kavana is a big word. It comes up all the way through Yiddishkeit. It has to do with what you're thinking about at the time. Kavana can mean meditation, but it really means intent more than anything else. Right? Intention, kavana. If the intention is directed to a non-productive activity, then even though the possible or even probable consequences of the action might be productive, the operation is not regarded as a malacha. Now remember, we're talking about malacha derisa, right? So you have to have the intent to do it. Can you close the door for me, Michael? Thank you. You have to have an intent for it to be a malacha derisa. You don't necessarily have to have the intent for it to be a rabbinic violation. But you remember the pain for a Torah act is very, very serious. Your soul is severed from your people as a result of it. Right? So it's not just simply doing the thing. You'll see there's many elements that have to be part of the process for it to qualify as a forbidden malacha in all its ways. For example, it is permitted to move a chair in order to change a position, whereby it is possible or probable that grooves will be produced in the ground, or walk on the grass, although it is possible and probable that the grass will be severed. However, where the consequences of the malacha being performed is inevitably bound up with the intended activity, the intention is deemed to be a malacha. This is called pasik resha. So let me give you another example. It came up in one of my classes. There are machines that are used to aerate grass, the lawns, right? And what they are is they're really just kind of sharp things that go in the spikes. Yeah. Not unlike high heels.
Yeah, that's right.
So what happens when a lady walks across a lawn on Shabbos? Right? She's aerating the grass, right?
Yeah, but much smaller.
And she's improving the ability of the grass to grow. Right? Well, let's say it's 20 women, at a garden party, right?
Okay. All right.
Right? So, but obviously their intent wasn't to do that.
Yeah. Any
more than your intent is when you pull a lawn chair to plow the grass, right? You're not trying to create a furrow, right? Even if you're doing it. When I walk to shul on Shabbos and I walk through the field, I'm not doing it in order to harvest the grass, right? If I was very conscious that I was doing it, if the grass was very high and I had to knock it down, there might be issues, right? But just walking on grass, it doesn't qualify, right? Pasik resha is an interesting phrase, and it refers to if your child likes to use a rooster's head for a ball, And so you cut the rooster's head off. Not because you want the rooster to die, but simply because you want your child to have a toy, the head, to play with. That's called Pesik Resha because the rooster's going to die. Right? You can't say, "Oh, I didn't intend for the rooster to die. I just want my child to have a toy."
Okay.
Right? So Pesik Resha is actually severing the head to give the toy to the child. Right? This was at a different time.
Yeah.
Today you can go out and buy a Spalding ball, baseball,
Not on
Walmart,
shops.
whatever. You don't have to find the rooster and cut its head off.
Yeah.
But this has many applications. An example is that for sure you can't go, and by the way, I'm not poskening here, I'm giving an example. Right? For sure, if you know that you forgot to turn the light off in the fridge Friday, right, and opening the fridge door, right, is going to cause the light to go on, you got a problem, right? You have a serious problem here, right? Because you can't get into your fridge, and it's Shabbos, right? So what can happen, right? You could ask a non-Jew if they would help you and get something out of the fridge for you, right? They can't turn the light off, they can't turn the light on, right? They didn't go to the fridge to turn the light on. They went to the fridge to get the food for you, right? Now, once they've done that, it's a good idea not to close the fridge door, for the rest of Shabbos, right? Because the light's on. Better example, you can't ask a non-Jew to do work you would not do, right? So, let's say I want the light on I'm a very wealthy person, I have a library on Shabbos. Right? I forgot to turn the light on the library, and I now would like to spend some leisure time in my library studying on Shabbos. Right? Lights off. Right? So can I say, if you happen to be in the library and it seems very dark in there, you can do whatever you need to have better light, to the non-Jew? No, I can't. Right? Because I'm really just telling him, go turn the light on, please. But I can say to him, I have a copy of a book on the Alter Rebbe, the Tanya, and it's on the third shelf. Could you get it for me? I can ask him to do that. Right? In order to find it, he has to turn the light on. Right? He's not actually turning the light on for me. He's turning on the light to make it easier for himself to find the book. Right? He is bringing me the book, but the reason he's turning the light on, right? So it's not a question of Pesik Resha, right? It's not a question. He actually has a different reason for going at that point, right? Now, when he comes to me, right, he's going to give me the book. He's going to turn the light off and come to me, right? So it's wise for me to greet him in the study at that moment, right? So once I'm in the study, he won't turn the light off, right? So the light has gone on, I have the book, and I can start to learn, right? And I haven't turned the light on, and I haven't asked him to turn the light on. It was one step removed, right? The same applies for, people using hot water. You can't, a Jew can't use hot water on Shabbos because he's cooking the water in the boiler, right? So
What about if you have like hot water heaters in houses, right? Like the big ones, right? That's got hot water burned in it from hours before you turned on your hot water.
That's right. So there's we'll come to this later, but there's no problem with using that hot water if no water goes into your boiler when you take that water out. That's the problem. So there are people who actually shut off the intake of their boiler before Shabbos, but there's an issue because if there's no water coming in, you lose the vacuum that causes the water pressure to bring the water to you. Right? Because the boiler's downstairs and goes up. Miraculously rises somehow. Right? It's a vacuum process. Right? So, but if you're not cooking new water on Shabbos, it's fine. But what happens is water goes out of the boiler, cold water goes into the boiler, and it cooks. And you've caused it to cook.
But but let's say you're at your sink, not your sink, or let's say you, in the morning you go to washroom, you wash your hair or you wash your hands.
Right.
You turn the hot water on. The hot water rises from the boiler, comes to your sink, comes out.
That was cooked long before Shabbos.
That's right. So that's okay.
Right.
But the water the water more water going into the boiler and being burned, that cannot be happen for hours. It doesn't happen.
No, it goes in
time.
immediately and starts cooking immediately.
Right away, the boiler
as soon
refills.
Immediately. The water, it's a continuous process. As water goes out, water goes back in. That's what keeps the water flowing.
But the fire is not always burning on a furnace.
It goes on as soon as cold water goes in.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It has a thermostat. As soon as it cools.
But if you if you have a big tank, you use I don't know, 2 gallons.
So you're causing the fire to go on and cook.
So it would come on.
Yeah.
Right away.
Yeah, as a result of what you're doing. Yeah. It comes on right away.
So
there are
shouldn't
systems.
wash your hair in the morning.
You shouldn't use hot water in Shabbos. Period.
Okay.
You shouldn't use hot water in Shabbos, right? Washing we'll come to that later. That's a whole other issue, right? So anyway, the point here is that there are situations where something is delayed, right, through 2 stages, and it's permitted, right? Because the intent was not to turn the light on. The intent was to get the book of the non-Jew at that point, right? So it was okay. Right? If you were asking a Jew to do it, it would be very serious, because in the back of your mind, gee, I'm asking him to go and find something. I would have to tell him, find it without turning the light on.
Yeah, which
at
is
that
not
point,
possible,
right? Which it's too much.
This is a cat.
Whereas Pesik Reisha, right, is a situation where inevitably, really what you're doing is you're killing the rooster. That's the purpose of what you're doing. You're going to kill the rooster and give the thing. You can't say, I was hoping the rooster would continue to live. After, it's a sort of thing. So that's Pesik Reisha. So, however, where the consequences of malacha being performed is inevitably bound up with the intended activity, Pesik Reisha, the intention is deemed to extend to the malacha. For example, it's forbidden to wash oneself over grass, right, as opposed to walking on grass, as the growth of the grass must inevitably be promoted by the water falling on it, although this consequence was not intended. Everybody knows when you water grass, it grows.
Yeah.
Right? So you can't do it. Now, there is a question. In the middle of a huge storm, can you wash your hands over grass? No, I'm serious.
Okay, so it's a massive storm happening, and you start washing your hands with another bowl of water outside.
Right. So
which water
outside your sukkah.
I know,
right?
which water is the one that's hitting.
So the question whether it's actually helping or hurting the grass grow, because it's so much water.
So much water. Yeah.
But there's a question of Marasayan. It's a whole other issue. But aim. There is no malacha if the aim of the creative activity is not the product itself. Malacha she'ein tzricha l'gufa. For example, according to the Torah, to extinguish a fire not for the sake of the product, not because I wanted the fire to go out, which is the coal, but in order that it should go out, should not go on burning, is not a malacha. Right? But if I was doing it to save money on the coal, I would be forbidden to do it. By the way, you're forbidden to do it anyway, but it's rabbinic. Is why you're forbidden to do it. Likewise, to dig, not for the sake of the pit, but for the dug out earth, is also not a malacha. You're not allowed to dig a pit, right? But could you take earth and just use earth, right, for something, right? That's a whole other question, right? So if the purpose of your digging is to obtain the earth as opposed to making a hole, right, then it's not a malacha. Again, it would be forbidden rabbinically for many reasons, but it's not a malacha d'oraisa. Right? The relation between a malacha she'ein tzricha l'gufa and Pesik Reisha is this, right? So they're quite close, these two things, right? And again, we're going to learn these things a few different ways, so if it's a little complicated, don't let it worry you at this point. With the latter, meaning Pesik Reisha, both the rooster without the head, right? With the latter, both the productive activity and the product itself are intended. Right? That is to say, cutting the head off for the sake of the toy. The toy is intended, while in the former, the product itself is explicitly excluded from the aim of the intended productive activity. I don't need the whole at all, right? I need the soil, right? So I'm not trying to dig, I'm trying to get soil, right? So it becomes an issue. Means, next thing. Malacha requires that the work should be executed in a way which shows the practical skill of man, i.e., in an impractical manner, and not by the cooperation of two people in an activity which can be carried out by one. For instance, let's say it's forbidden to open that pop bottle, right? Because in opening it, I'm creating a cup with the top. It's a small cup, I admit. A little kli I'm creating, right? I'm not allowed to do it, right? Some people hold this to be true, right? So the way you can open it without violating Shabbos is you hold the bottle and Michael unscrews the top. It's why it takes 2 Jews to open a soda bottle on Shabbos, right? In case I'm going to ask you, how many Jews does it take to open soda? It takes 3, actually. 1 to explain the halacha,
that's it.
And 2 to execute it, right? Actually 4, because 1 has to disagree with it.
There has to be another opinion.
And then 5 to bring together.
5.
I have a question.
You got a whole party now.
Do these first 4 or 5 categories, are they mentioned in the Talmud?
Oh yeah.
They are.
Yeah. The Talmud and the Shulchan Aruch.
How are they mentioned in different laws? So is this theoretical framework? He's summarizing from a whole set of laws.
Yeah. What he's doing is he's bringing down the malachas are defined in Shabbos in the Talmud, the 39 malachas in the.
And they talk about consciousness, aim, means, and they connect with, like he's doing it here.
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely, yeah. He's really summarizing a longer discussion, actually.
We're going to get to that here.
What?
You're going to get to that here.
Well, soon we're going to get to malachas themselves. But right now...
We'll get to it, don't worry about it.
Yeah, it says right here.
So, but what he's doing is, think of it this way, just for a moment, but don't dwell on it. Doing a malacha is a kind of crime, right? It's a crime against our Creator, our partner in creation. Right? So, God wants to make sure that in order to actually commit it in the first degree, right? That is to say, with all the intent, he's saying it's not easy. An Adam Gadol, a great pasuk that I know, once commented to me. He said, truth is, it's very, very hard to violate Shabbos D'Oraisa today.
Really?
It's not easy to do. Not easy to do. Rabbinically is a breeze.
Oh, okay.
But D'Oraisa, right? You have to know it, first of all, right? For instance, a person who has never been observant, right? He didn't violate anything D'Oraisa. The fact that he was driving and eating cheeseburgers on Shabbos and cooking them on his barbecue doesn't mean he violated D'Oraisa. He has to know it. He has to have intent. There's a whole series of things, right? In order to do
you're
it.
Saying it's hard to
he shouldn't do it. Rabbinically, he shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
But you have to know all this stuff in order to actually violate it. Right?
Oh, okay.
Most people don't know it. And certainly most people who are not observant don't know it. To be an apikorus, to be somebody who is apikorus and a heretic, right? You have to be very learned. You can't just be somebody who doesn't like the religion. You have to knowingly and with great knowledge, right? There are examples of such people in the Talmud, right? And they are brilliant men of great learning in the Torah who, for one reason or another, went in the other direction, right? But they came to the conclusion, the wrong conclusion through Talmudic reasoning. They didn't just say, "Gee, I don't want to do this," right? It's they said, this is not right. God is wrong, right? And we have examples. We'll come to it. You'll read about it in Pirkei Avos a little bit as well, and you see. But they come from a line of great thinkers.
Wouldn't you say Balak was one?
What?
Balak?
No. Balak. First of all, you have to be Jewish to be an of course.
Yeah.
Right? Balak is a chosen prophet of the nations, to some degree, so that the nations couldn't say, well, you never gave us a Moshe Rabbeinu, right? So how did you expect us to do well? And God said, no, I spoke face to face with your prophet. Right? It's a separate conversation. Okay, so still, we've done 4 qualifications so far, right? First one was consciousness, right? Second one was intent, right? So you're aware that you're doing it. Your intention is to do it, right? Your aim is to do it for the sake of the malacha itself, not for some other purpose, right? And the means that you employ, very important, are the normal means for employing it. It's forbidden to write on Shabbos, right? So if you end up, your wife is pregnant, you're going to the hospital, and they won't take her unless you sign her in, right? They won't accept it unless you sign her in. If you sign with your left hand, if you're a righty, right, you haven't done a malacha. Because the normal way to do it is with your right hand, right? So that's another qualification for a first-degree violation, right? It has to be the way you would normally do it, right?
The normal method.
Yeah.
So if you turn a light on with your shoulder, that's not breaking a malacha?
It's not a malacha if you do it that way.
You don't really lean.
There's a big question about intent at that point, and you have to think about it very carefully before you do it, because you're in a rebellious way trying to find the loophole. But a better example would be, and this happens all the time, is that you're in a room and somebody turns the light off because they've leaned against the light switch, right? Or turned it on because they leaned against the light switch. They didn't do a malacha at that point, right? What happened was it was a mistake, and they also didn't do it the normal way, right? So if you do something in an unusual way, if there's something that you can't move like this because it's muktzah, you can move it like that, right? Or with your knee, right? You can do that in that situation. It's called the shinui. We'll come to it later.
And writing is derisive.
We'll come to each malacha on its own.
Oh, okay.
Right. Writing is a fence around doing business, right? Because you can't do business without writing. You need a contract, right? So if you don't have a contract, then you won't do business. If you don't write, then you can't have a contract. If you don't pick up a pen, then you can't write.
Okay.
But in fact, we're coming to the next point, which is exactly along those lines, a shear. Shear is a measurement, right? A malacha requires that the product should have the size which serves human purposes. So, for instance, on Yom Kippur, if you were to eat half of an olive on Yom Kippur, would you have violated the fast? Halachically, no. That's right. Because you have to eat a kazayas in order to do it, which is a large olive or a small egg, in order to do it. You have eaten for sure, right?
But not enough.
But you didn't violate the halach. Writing. If you write 1 letter on Shabbos, it's not a violation. If you write 2, it is. Because 1 is not viewed as, on the way to a contract, I guess.
Why is a child then excluded?
What?
A child.
Children, first of all, they're not excluded. Right? You can write with magnets if you want. That's not called writing.
That's what I meant.
It's not called writing.
That's what I meant. Children I know are not. I don't let my son write on
Yeah, they're not.
But they're not making a contract.
There's 2 different things, right? They're not chayav. They're not held responsible for any affairs that they do, right? And it depends on what age they are, how you deal with it, right? But the question is, the light is off in the house, right? I have a 3-year-old, right? And I've been teaching him to kiss the mezuzah, right? Good thing, right? I'm going to take him to the light switch and see what he does. Right? He's used to reaching to the wall and doing things, right? I'll take him to the light switch and see what he does. Oh, look, my cute little son turned on the light. He's 3 years old. There's no avera, right? There's no damage he's done to himself. He's not responsible. He's not chayav, right? All of it is true. But you're presupposing when you do that that he doesn't have the ability to learn at the age of 3.
He does.
And I would argue that a child has the ability to learn when he's in the womb. You know, that I think we all know how important it is that a pregnant woman be in a calm environment, that there be calm sounds around her, you know, soft music or soft voices, right? Because we understand that this is part of the environment of the child. You know? How much more so with a 3-year-old, you're now teaching him to turn the light on, right? You know, you're saying, well, he didn't commit an error, right? He didn't commit an error, and you didn't commit an error, but you did a pretty silly thing, because everything you do is chinuch in life. Everything you do is teaching. Right? You know, the famous story about people who came to the Rabbi and said, you know, what school should I'm trying to figure out what school I should send my son to, and I haven't decided yet. But you know, he's only 4 years old, so I still have, you know, a couple of years to make that decision. You know, and the Rabbi said, "You're 5 years late in making that decision." Right? That every moment of our lives with our children, right, is chinuch. Whether they are at what is called the age of chinuch, you know, 6 to 9, right? You know, or past upshurners, past 3. Right? My own feeling is, you know, from my own personal experience, is that a child may not remember consciously things that happened very early in his life. To think that it's not there, everything goes against it. We know that it's much easier for a child to learn than an adult. Somebody who is, you know, 12 years old will pick up a language, 8 years old pick up a language much faster than somebody who is a mature PhD from a university, right? You know, there are children who grow up in families and speak 3 languages by the time they're 6. Understand and speak, you know, Hebrew, Russian, English, whatever, right? You know, and by the way,
but there is a lot of research which says that when they learn multiple languages,
they learn them all slower. Right. But when adults learn multiple languages, it's much slower.
They're much slower than a child. Yeah.
And by the way, you know, Japanese is a hard language. And a friend of mine once commented, he said, in Japan, even 3-year-olds speak Japanese beautifully. You know, it's an amazing thing. Right. So, you know. Anyway, the point is that
of course they do.
Right, because they have to get orange juice too. Right. You know. But so anyway, so the point of this is that every moment is chinuch. Right? I think a parent should see it that way, and because your child is not chayav, is not held liable for turning the light switch on and off. You have to be very conscious. What have you taught him at that moment? You know, specifically and in general. So it's always good to err on the side of what is the halacha. You know.
I have another question which bears upon what Hashem is said to have done after He created the world on the 7th day. He blessed it, said that it was perfect. My question is, when we do not do these forbidden activities, are these forbidden activities specified in Yiddishkeit so that we can bless Hashem? Because if we do these malachas, then we're creating and not turning around and blessing God, blessing the week that we went through.
I think that, as I understand your question, I think absolutely, yeah. That, you know, in some ways during the weekdays we have one kind of partnership with God, right? The world, as Rabbi Breitowitz likes to put it, is perfect for God's purposes. Not everywhere has the weather of California. And maybe the world would be perfect if, you know, everybody had the weather of California. I don't know. But God intended that, you know, that we drive especially carefully tonight. You know, and have a consciousness and awareness of what our status is on the road, where we might be in autopilot most nights, right? There's something special about this night, for that reason, right? So that doesn't mean because it snowed here, it's an imperfect climate. It is perfect for the purposes God created it. And it means that during the week, right, our partnership with God is to continue the path that He has set out for us in creation. So, He has created the idea of wheat. We've created the idea of challah. So on Friday, we take the wheat that God has given us, right, and we bring it to another level of holiness, challah. So that's one kind of partnership. But I would argue there's another kind of partnership. And that's the partnership of Shabbos. It's much more intimate. It's not about, sharing a craft, right? God's craft in growing wheat, our craft in baking. Good partnership, it worked out well, right? But there's something, I think, much greater than that, right? Which is coming to share an understanding of one another. Right? Now, I want to be cautious about this because I don't want to pretend that as a result of Shabbos we have a great understanding of God. But it is a time of greater revelation of God's qualities on His part. And it is a time that we put aside to recognize that revelation. So there's a level of intimacy that can exist. And once again, I forgot to bring Kegavna with me, which I looked at it today. It's sitting on my dining room table. I wanted to bring it in to show it to you.
What?
But Kegavna, it's what Chabad says on Friday night, right? And not just Chabad, it's Nusach Sephard and Nusach Ari. But it's a time of intimacy. Imagine, during the day, right? Families think about each other. My son had tests today, midterms, right? He was very conscious of what his day was like, and I was praying that it went well for him, and he thinks about my day, and we think about each other. Right? But it's different when we're all home together, right, face to face. Right? It's a different relationship at that moment. He's doing his job, I'm doing my job, my wife's doing her job, right? And then there's this moment where, God willing, on a good day, where we can sit down and have dinner together, right? It didn't mean that we loved each other less all day long when we didn't see each other. But that time at dinner was very special. It's a very important time, right? So Shabbos is like that. The partnership exists 24/7 between the Jew and God, and between man and God, but especially the Jew and God. But Shabbos is put aside for a different element of that relationship.
So we're blessing our week, and we're blessing Hashem, and putting it in a context that it's perfect and good on Shabbos.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
That's, I was trying to understand what's behind all these malachas.
What's behind all these malachas is really defining what happens the rest of the time, so that you put a fence around those things.
From the profane,
it's for there.
From the profane, from the
mundane. I don't think it's profane. People used to use the term profane. I think it's wrong.
Well, okay.
Building a bridge is not profane. Right?
I meant the separation.
Yeah. So it's
mundane.
It's really mundane. It's
the
requirements. It can be the drudgery of everyday work. People have.
You're supposed to keep it holy, right? That's the whole thing.
But it's a time where our relationship with God changes and recognizably changes.
Cool.
It's very important.
Yeah. Okay, I want to try to get through. We're almost done with the requirements. So a shear, we're up to a shear, right? Which is you have to do a certain amount of that work for it to become a malacha. Right? Realization. Number 6, realization. A malacha, part of the definition, requires that the realization of an idea does not fall short of the intention, the nases machshava. Right? That is, all this is nothing. Sorry, doesn't fall short of the intention, right? So if you don't succeed at doing the malacha, you tried, right? It's also not a malacha, right? You know, if you went outside to try and start your car and you failed, it's attempted malacha. It's not a malacha.
Attempted malacha.
Right? It's not a full malacha at that point. Remember, all the things I just described are prohibited for us to do on Shabbos, even though they're not called malachas. A malacha is often called an av malacha, a parent malacha, and then there's toldos malachas, which are derived from the parent, and then there's rabbinic ones, which are fences around it. And we'll come to an understanding of that as we go forward. Each one of them have different penalties and different levels of importance, right? And also have, you know, if you violate a malacha because somebody is sick, right? It's not simply to say he's not well, so, you know, I'm going to drive him, right? He has to be seriously ill in order for you to drive him. So there's a difference between somebody who has a headache, somebody who's bedridden, someone who is in danger of a life-threatening situation. Each of those are different, right? They all appear to be somebody who's not well. Now, how we judge those things, which it is, right, is a very important thing to come to understand. And I should say, before I go any further, that in that situation, we judge it very, very, very conservatively. You know, if there is any doubt of either the person or somebody close to the person or a physician or an expert as to how serious the illness is, then that person is treated as the next level of illness up, whatever it is, right? That is to say, if the doctor says, I don't think there's anything wrong with him, and he says, I feel very sick,
You got to go with
right,
safety reasons.
you go with his opinion. If a doctor says that he's fine, and he says, you know, I'm okay, just leave me alone, and his wife says, that's not normal, he's sick, you don't listen to the doctor, and you don't listen to him. You take him, right? So any of those three individuals can change the nature and the analysis of it. We don't gamble in that situation.
Err on side of caution, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's a very important thing to do. If you can ask a Rav, it's not a bad idea. But if you can't, right, these things are often emergencies, then you act as though they are emergencies. Right. Okay, so
All of this is
two.
nothing.
Okay. All of this arises directly from the Sabbath idea. To constitute malacha, the activity has to be productive. That is, it must realize an intelligent purpose. Are we repeating what we said before? Yeah.
No.
Yeah, we are. It must realize an intelligent purpose by practical skill. It must not be destructive. For ability to destroy is something which man has in common with the beast. To tear down a house on Shabbos is not a malacha, although you're not allowed to do it. But where the destruction is a prelude to reconstruction, such a destruction becomes a productive act and therefore is a malacha.
That's right.
So if you're tearing it down because you're going to rebuild it, right, then you can't tear it down because it's part of the building process. You know, the very famous story of Rabbi Akiva in the Temple Mount, right, is that his friends were tearing Kriya and crying, and Akiva was laughing because they saw a fox run out of the Kodesh Kodashim, where the Kodesh Kodashim would have been had the Romans not destroyed it. And Akiva was laughing. And they said, what brings you to joy? This is a terrible tragedy that we're witnessing. And he said, no, you don't understand. The prophet told us that this would one day happen. Right? And if he said this would one day happen, and we see it, we know that his prophecy will be fulfilled, which is the temple will be rebuilt. So this is a stage of the process, right? One could say the destruction of the second base of Mikdash is part of the building of the third base of Mikdash. You know. In this malacha here, it says that you cannot tear something down if your intent is to rebuild. So, The destruction is. Did you have a question?
Oh, I've seen.
Yeah.
So Rabbi, he was laughing at the fox.
He was joyous when he saw this terrible thing happening,
Yeah.
because he understood that this would have to happen before the temple would rebuild. It was a requirement that vermin would run through the Holy of Holies.
Oh,
right?
okay.
That's
So,
Malachi's writing.
What?
Malachi's writing is right.
Also, yeah. So if it hadn't happened, it meant there would be no hope of the rebuilding of the temple, because that's a requirement.
He's
before
showing
it
the
happens,
prophecy.
right? Yeah. So to sum up,
Part of it.
Rav Hirsch says, only an activity which covers the aforementioned conditions is called malacha proper, right? First degree malacha. And if done on the Sabbath, incurs the death and excision according to the law of Torah, which considers the performance of a malacha on the Sabbath day a denial of God and a negation of a Jew's vocation on earth. However, except when there is no consciousness and intention, certain other activities too, although they are not malacha proper, have been drawn by our sages into a prohibited range, since these activities border on a malacha. Right? They are prohibited by the power of gezerah d'Rabbanan, of a decision of the Rabbanim, rabbinic decree. Right? I think we're going to hold here for this. Right, but we've covered, just to review very quickly, what's required for something to be a true violation, Torah violation. Consciousness, right? I am aware that it's Shabbos, and I'm aware that it's forbidden. Intention, kavana. It is my intention to violate Shabbos now. Right? Aim, right? I have to be doing the act with the aim of violating Shabbos. If the purpose of my digging is for the soil and not for the hole, then that wasn't a malacha. Whereas B'sik Reisha is, right? Means, I have to do it the normal way. If I'm right-handed, I have to do it with my right hand. If it's normal for one person to do it, if two people do it, it's not a malacha. Right. Shear, size. I have to do the malacha at the level that it really has an impact of some kind, right? So if I just do a tiny bit, if I write one letter, by the way, it's a rabbinic violation to write the one letter, right? If I write one letter, it's not a malacha. If I write two, it's beyond the shear. Right? Realization. I have to complete the process, right? I have to succeed at the malacha in order for it to happen, right? If you don't have all of these, 5 out of 6 is not enough. If you have all 6 of them, right, then you have a violation of law. So the most famous example of this, and we can look at it at some time down the road, is the man who collected wood on Shabbos. Right?
You know, who got the death penalty for it?
Yeah, right. Now, we understand, by the way, through our sages, that he actually did that intentionally. Right. But his intent was not simply to violate Shabbos. His intent was, he was making a personal sacrifice. That people would see how serious the violation of Shabbos is. And that's why he did it. It says that he's the father of the daughters of Schlafad,
who later
go
to Moses, right?
Go to Moses for an opinion on inheritance. Right? We'll come to talk about it